Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The night had settled over Genoa city with a deceptive calm, the kind of quiet that carries the weight of secrets waiting to explode, and within that stillness Kyle Abbott found himself standing on the fringes of a truth that would shatter not only his perception of the people he loved, but also the very foundation of the life he thought he knew, because as he moved through the dimly lit corridor of the Chancellor Winter's estate, drawn by the faint sound of a baby's cry echoing through the walls, like a haunting melody, he stumbled upon a scene that froze him in his tracks and sent shockwaves tearing through his chest, for there in the glow of the nursery lamp stood Claire Grace, her delicate frame silhouetted as she cradled a child in her arms with a tenderness that could only come from the deepest well of maternal love, and Kyle's breath hitched, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest, because nothing in the world had prepared him for this moment, for the sight of Claire, whose presence in Genoa city had already stirred curiosity, suspicion, and unresolved pain, holding an infant whose very identity now loomed like the most dangerous question of all, and as Kyle pressed himself against the wall, unable to make a sound for fear of giving himself away, he felt the sharp stab of betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak all at once, because something about the way Claire rocked the baby, the way she whispered softly into the child's ear, the way her face softened in a glow of unfiltered devotion, told him this wasn't just an innocent babysitting moment or a passing coincidence. This child mattered to her in a way that spoke of blood, of lineage, of secrets that had been carefully buried under layers of manipulation and lies, and in that instant, Kyle knew he was witnessing the unraveling of a mystery that would tear through every family in Genoa city like a hurricane, because the question roared in his mind with relentless force: who is the child Claire is holding, and why has no one spoken of this before? Kyle's mind raced back over every recent event, every hushed conversation, every nervous glance between Claire and the Newmans, every warning Nikki had quietly whispered about trust, every time Victoria had gone oddly silent when the subject of Claire's past came up, and suddenly the fragments began to align into a terrifying picture, because what if the child Claire held wasn't just any baby? What if it was connected to the Newman dynasty in a way that threatened to reopen scars long thought healed, or worse, what if this child was tied to his own world, his own tangled family web of Abbotts and Newmans and enemies who had always thrived in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike? The sight of Claire rocking the child stirred a memory in Kyle, a moment earlier that day when he overheard Summer on the phone with Phyllis, their voices urgent and clipped, discussing something about the child and the danger of the truth coming out, words that at the time Kyle had brushed off as just another round of mother-daughter dramatics, but now those words thundered back to him like a prophecy, a warning he had ignored until it was too late, and as he leaned closer, desperate for answers, he heard Claire whisper a name, so soft it nearly dissolved into the hum of the night air, but to Kyle's ears it was a dagger. She called the baby Evelyn, and the way her voice broke around the syllables made it clear this wasn't just a borrowed child, this wasn't just a moment of kindness, this was her child, or at least a child she believed to be hers, and Kyle's head spun with the weight of it, because no one had spoken of Claire being a mother, no one had hinted that there was a baby tucked away somewhere in her past, and if Evelyn was indeed hers, then who was the father, and why had this truth been hidden from everyone in Genoa city? His heart fractured in that moment, because while Kyle had tried to put distance between himself and Claire, he had also felt that magnetic pull toward her, the kind that comes from two broken souls recognizing something in each other, and now, watching her with the baby, he realized that everything he thought he knew about her had been a facade, a carefully constructed story designed to conceal this secret, and he couldn't help but feel the bitter sting of betrayal, as if the fragile trust they had built had been nothing more than smoke and mirrors, and yet, underneath that pain, there was something else too, something raw and disarming, an ache of empathy, because he saw in Claire's eyes the reflection of someone who had lived in chains, who had been denied love, who had been twisted by a childhood of torment at the hands of Jordan, and perhaps this child represented her chance at redemption, her anchor in a storm that had nearly destroyed her, and though part of him wanted to burst into the room, to demand answers, to shake the truth out of her, another part of him wanted to stay rooted to the spot, because he wasn't sure he could survive whatever answer she gave, wasn't sure his heart could withstand hearing who Evelyn really was, whether she was the child of someone he loved, someone he trusted, someone he could never forgive for keeping this hidden. As Kyle stood frozen, his thoughts began to spiral toward dangerous possibilities, because what if Evelyn wasn't just Claire's child? What if she was tied to Harrison in some way? What if there was a shared bond of blood that had been manipulated, hidden, or twisted into existence by people who had long thrived on destroying families? What if this was part of a grander scheme orchestrated by Jordan, a final knife to the heart of the Newmans and the Abbotts alike, to leave them all questioning their bloodlines, their loyalties, their very identities? The heartbreak Kyle felt now was sharper than anything he had endured since his marriage with Summer fell apart, sharper even than the day he learned the truth about Harrison's paternity, because at least then, despite the devastation, there had been clarity, but now there was only a murky storm of uncertainty, with every possibility more painful than the last, and as he pressed his back against the cold wall, his eyes burning, he realized that no matter what the truth was, nothing would ever be the same again, because Claire's child, this Evelyn, was about to become the center of a battle that would fracture families, destroy trust, and force every secret into the light, and Kyle, standing here tonight, was the first to witness the beginning of that war. Kyle's throat tightened as he tried to breathe through the surge of emotions tearing him apart, because every second that passed with Claire holding that baby in her arms only deepened the storm inside him, and though he wanted to tell himself that this wasn't his business, that he had no right to spy on her in this private moment, something in his gut told him that he couldn't walk away, not when everything about this child screamed of hidden truths and buried connections. And so he stayed, his hands trembling at his sides as he leaned further against the wall, his mind racing with memories of the last few months, replaying every interaction with Claire like a reel of film, suddenly exposing frames he had never noticed before, the way she had gone quiet when talk of families came up, the almost imperceptible flinch whenever someone mentioned children, the time she had lingered just a little longer near Harrison, her eyes clouded with something he couldn't quite name at the time, something that now looked far too much like longing, regret, and a desperate wish for what she couldn't openly claim, and now, as she pressed a kiss to the child's forehead, whispering something that sounded like a promise, Kyle felt his chest split open, because he knew, this wasn't some random baby borrowed from a sitter or left in her care for an evening, this was a child tethered to her by blood, by history, by choices no one had dared speak aloud, and that knowledge ignited 1,000 more questions that only deepened his heartbreak. What if Evelyn, the baby whose name Claire had just whispered into the air like a sacred secret, was the daughter of someone he knew, someone whose life was entangled in his own, someone who had chosen to hide her existence because the truth was too dangerous, too volatile, too explosive to be unleashed on Genoa City? His heart thudded painfully as his mind leapt first to Victoria, Claire's mother in all but title, and the possibility that perhaps Evelyn was tied to the Newman bloodline in ways no one had dared imagine, perhaps the child of a union Victoria had tried to keep buried, or worse, a remnant of Jordan's twisted manipulations, the kind of nightmare come to life that would scar everyone it touched. But then another, even more devastating thought clawed at Kyle's mind, one he tried to shove away but couldn't, because what if Evelyn wasn't a Newman at all? What if she was connected to him, to Harrison, to Tara, to the life he had tried so hard to shield from scandal and betrayal? What if this baby was a product of secrets so dark they had been buried not for Claire's sake, but for his family's, and the crushing weight of that possibility pressed against his chest until he thought he might collapse right there in the hallway. He remembered the way Summer had bristled any time Claire came near Harrison, the way Phyllis's voice had gone sharp with warning whenever the topic of Claire's rehabilitation and place in their lives surfaced, the way Diane had pulled him aside just last week and muttered that some people could never truly be trusted no matter how much they cried for redemption, and now all of those warnings echoed like prophecy, because maybe they had known, maybe they had suspected, maybe they had pieced together fragments of a puzzle he had been too blind to see, blinded by his need to believe in second chances, to see Claire not as the broken, manipulated pawn Jordan had created, but as a woman desperate for love and belonging, someone who deserved a chance at a normal life. Yet here was the truth, unraveling before his eyes, that her fresh start had always included a secret she couldn't share, and now that secret was staring him in the face in the form of a baby with wide, innocent eyes. And a future already marked by the sins of the past. Kyle's legs felt weak as he thought about Harrison, his son, the child who had already lived through too much turmoil for someone so young, and the terrifying possibility that Harrison's world was about to be turned upside down again if Evelyn's existence threatened his place in the family, because children didn't just belong to themselves in Genoa City, they became weapons, bargaining chips, pawns in wars waged by their parents and grandparents, and Kyle knew all too well how ruthless those wars could become, because he had lived through them himself, torn apart by lies about his own paternity, used as leverage in the ceaseless battles between the Abbotts and the Newmans, and now, watching Claire cradle Evelyn with such fierce devotion, he knew another war was brewing, one that would pit love against betrayal, loyalty against blood, and he was already at the center of it whether he wanted to be or not. Tears burned in his eyes as he thought about the future, how he would have to look into Summer's face and confess what he had seen tonight, how he would have to explain to Jack and Diane that he had stumbled onto a secret capable of detonating every alliance and truce they had managed to hold together, how he would have to confront Claire and demand the truth, even though part of him wanted to protect her, to shield her from the inevitable judgment that would rain down once the truth came out. Because he couldn't deny that in the midst of his heartbreak, he also felt a strange pull of sympathy for her, a recognition of her pain, because he saw in the way she clutched Evelyn that this baby was not a weapon or a pawn to her, this baby was her salvation, her reason to keep breathing, her second chance at a life free from Jordan's shadow, and the thought of tearing that away from her, of being the one to expose it, felt almost unbearable, yet he knew he had no choice, because secrets in Genoa City never stayed buried, and the longer they were hidden, the more devastating their fallout became when they were finally dragged into the light. The baby stirred then, letting out a soft cry that made Claire rock her gently, murmuring words Kyle couldn't quite hear, and in that moment he felt the full weight of his heartbreak, because he realized that he wasn't just heartbroken for himself, for the lies he had been tangled in, for the betrayal he felt at being shut out of a truth so enormous, he was heartbroken for Evelyn, for the innocent child who would grow up with her life defined by secrets, lies, and battles she hadn't chosen. Heartbroken for Harrison, who might soon be caught in the crossfire of yet another family war, heartbroken for Claire, who despite her mistakes and her dark past was clearly fighting with every breath to hold on to this one pure thing in her life, and perhaps most painfully, heartbroken for the man he had become, someone who could no longer look at the people he loved without suspicion, someone who couldn't walk into a room without wondering what secrets were being kept from him, someone who now stood in a hallway watching a scene that should have been beautiful but instead felt like the beginning of an ending he couldn't stop. The silence pressed in again as Claire settled Evelyn back into the crib, tucking a soft blanket around her tiny form, and Kyle felt his body sway with the need to retreat, to slip away before Claire caught him, before the confrontation came too soon, but his feet felt glued to the floor, as if some invisible force demanded he stay, demanded he witness every second of this revelation. Because deep down he knew that from this night forward, there would be no going back, no pretending he hadn't seen, no denying the truth, and as Claire turned and lingered by the crib, her hand resting protectively on the rail, her face etched with a vulnerability he had never seen before, Kyle's heart broke all over again, because he finally understood that the answer to the question, who is the child Claire is holding, wasn't just about names, or bloodlines, or paternity, it was about destiny. About the way lives in Genoa City were always tangled together in webs too complex to escape, and Evelyn, whoever she truly was, had just become the center of that web, the spark that would ignite a firestorm, and Kyle, whether he was ready or not, was already consumed by its flames. Kyle's pulse thundered in his ears as he stood there, paralyzed, the hallway air heavy with the kind of tension that precedes storms, because even though every fiber of his body screamed for him to retreat, to steal away and leave this secret cocoon untouched, he knew the truth was no longer content to remain hidden, and something stronger than fear pushed him forward, his shoes clicking softly against the polished wood as he stepped into the nursery, and the instant Claire's head snapped up. Her blue eyes wide with shock and terror, the fragile bubble she had been living in shattered, and Kyle saw it all in her face, the panic of being caught, the dread of questions she had no rehearsed answers for, and the flicker of a desperate plea for understanding. And for a heartbeat the world seemed to freeze, the only sound the steady hum of the crib's music mobile, until Kyle's voice, low and trembling, cut through the silence. Whose child is she, Claire? The words hung between them like a blade, and Claire's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came, her throat working, her arms instinctively reaching back toward the crib as though to shield Evelyn from him, and in that protective gesture Kyle's heart cracked even more, because it told him all he needed to know. This child wasn't a stranger, wasn't someone else's problem, wasn't just a fleeting presence in her life, she was her everything, and Claire would rather die than let her go. The room felt suffocating as Kyle stepped closer, his eyes burning, his chest tight, and he whispered again, this time harsher, his voice edged with the heartbreak and fury roiling inside him, you need to tell me the truth. Who is she? Claire's body trembled, her hands gripping the edge of the crib like it was her lifeline, and finally, after a long, agonizing silence, her voice broke free, raw and ragged, she's mine, Kyle. The words sliced through him like a knife, and he staggered back a step, his vision blurring with tears as his mind spun out of control, because hearing the confession spoken aloud made it real in a way he had dreaded, and though he wanted to scream, to demand answers, to unleash all the pain he felt, all he could manage was a strangled whisper, how? When? Why didn't you? But Claire cut him off, her voice rising in desperation, I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't trust anyone. You think I wanted to hide her? You think I wanted to live every day terrified that if anyone knew, she'd be taken from me? She's all I have, Kyle, she's the only thing that's mine, the only thing Jordan didn't destroy. Her words tumbled out in a torrent, her eyes blazing with a mix of fear and defiance, and Kyle, though furious and broken, couldn't help but see the anguish in her, the truth that this secret hadn't been kept out of malice but out of terror, the terror of losing the one piece of light she had managed to hold on to after a life lived in darkness, and yet, even knowing that, his chest ached with betrayal, because she had stood in his home, eaten at his table, looked him in the eye, and never once allowed him to glimpse the enormity of this secret, and he couldn't stop himself from choking out, who's the father, Claire? Tell me right now, who is he? The question landed like thunder, and Claire flinched, her gaze dropping to the crib as though she could hide the truth in the folds of Evelyn's blanket, and for a moment she said nothing, her silence louder than any confession, until finally, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she whispered, it doesn't matter who he is. What matters is that she's mine, and she's safe, and I won't let anyone take her away from me. Kyle's heart lurched, because that answer was no answer at all, and in Genoa City, a refusal to name the father was as good as confirmation that the truth was explosive enough to destroy lives, and his mind spiraled through possibilities like a wheel spinning out of control. Was it some stranger from Claire's past, someone tied to her captivity, someone Jordan had forced into her life, or was it someone closer, someone who would rock their families to their core? The not knowing gnawed at him, and his voice cracked with anguish as he pressed her, you can't just say that and expect me to walk away. Who is she, Claire? Who does she belong to? Claire's shoulders shook as she clutched the crib, her tears dripping onto the railing, and she shook her head violently, no. I won't give you a name. I can't. If I say it out loud, everything will come crashing down, and I can't lose her, I won't lose her. The rawness of her pain pierced him, but his own heartbreak demanded answers, and he stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers, his voice a broken plea, do you have any idea what you're doing to me? To all of us? You're not just hiding a baby, Claire, you're hiding a truth that could destroy my family, and if you care about me at all, if you care about Harrison, you'll tell me the truth. At the mention of Harrison, Claire's eyes flickered, a shadow of something unreadable flashing across her face, and Kyle felt his stomach drop, because that flicker told him more than her words ever could. It told him there was a connection here, a thread tying Evelyn to his world, to his son, to his family, and the thought nearly brought him to his knees, because if Evelyn was Harrison's half-sister, if she shared his blood, then the war that was coming would rip through everything he had fought to build, and there would be no way to shield his little boy from the fallout. The silence stretched long and heavy between them, and finally Claire whispered, her voice breaking, you weren't supposed to know like this. I wanted to protect you, to protect her, to protect everyone, but I guess I was fooling myself thinking secrets can stay hidden in this town. Her words rang with bitter truth, and Kyle felt his chest tighten with both rage and sorrow, because she was right, secrets in Genoa City were like time bombs, and sooner or later, they always went off, and now that he had stumbled onto this one, it was already ticking, its countdown unstoppable. He wanted to scream, to demand clarity, to drag the truth into the light right then and there, but he also knew that pressing her further would only push her deeper into fear, and so he stood there, his fists clenched, his heart breaking, his voice a whisper of defeat. "This changes everything, Claire. Everything."